Countdown Nation, welcome to another edition of TKO Countdown here on the BarnBurner Media Network and Zingo TV. We have a special edition for you today, extended edition, as we are celebrating the 25th anniversary of the movie Dangerous Minds. A quick reminder, though, that Zingo TV is available on the BarnBurner and Zingo TV apps, which you can download for free from iOS or Android. So please leave a comment while you rate and download the app. Zingo TV is also available on Amazon and Amazon Fire Sticks, Google Chromecast, Roku and Roku Sticks, and of course, all smart TVs from 2016 and forward. All right, so I'm excited about this show. It's not every day that something hits the 25th anniversary mark, and Dangerous Minds is a movie that helped define the 90s generation. And we are especially excited to have author, teacher, Luann Jem's book, My Posse Doesn't Do Homework, the book that the movie was based on. She is going to be joining us momentarily to discuss the movie, its impact, and so on and so forth. But while we're here and waiting, let's introduce the TKO Countdown panel, our faithful panel here every week, and beginning, of course, with Cassie Wiseman, the host of the Wiseman Report and senior editor of MMA Crossfire. She's also proficient in the martial arts of Hapkido, Taekwondo, and so on and so forth. She joins us from St. John's, Newfoundland, where she is also a registered massage therapist. Wow, what an intro. Cass, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome. It was the merch that got it all.
So there's the merch there. And you all know what to do. I don't have to say a thing. You all know what to do. Countdown Nation, you saw it. So I'm gonna move forward here and introduce Anya Wassenberg, of course. An online writing instructor, former blogger for the Huffington Post. She has a degree in French from McMaster University, and of course, she resides in the great city of Hamilton, Ontario, where she also manages her popular blog, artsandculturemaven.com. Anya, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me back once again. Looking forward to it.
Oh, all right. And the big man here, Noel Club, who trains elite amateur and professional athletes, certified boxing Ontario coach, and the head coach of Primal MMA, and of course, the new host of the hit show Knockout here on BarnBurner as well. And of course, a boxing columnist at the MMA Crossfire. Noel, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Just missing my branding like Miss Wiseman has there.
Boxing gloves.
Yeah. looking very spiffy, of course. Cass is always a step ahead in the branding department there. And guys, we usually talk about mixed martial arts and combat sports and things of that nature, but I think it's a special thing here to have someone of Luann Johnson's caliber here, an award-winning teacher, a former Marine, and someone who is proficient in martial arts as well, who is going to share her story about her book that turned into this hit movie, Dangerous Minds. What do you guys think about the movie? I'm sure some of you saw it in the theater, or maybe some of you saw it afterwards. I know it's on iTunes. I have it on iTunes. I guess let's start off with you, Anya. What do you think about the movie?
Well, there's a bit of a tradition of these movies about professors and their relationships to their students and whatnot that I've never been particularly attracted to, but this movie was the exception because it was so different, right? It was more about it was actually more of a social commentary as well, right? Mm-hmm. So and also it had great music.
Yeah. Of course it featured the hit song Gangster's Paradise by Coolio, which went on to win a Grammy Award that year, and it was really one of the highlights of the movie, and for what I've read actually helped push the movie through to become a hit, because as I read the movie was having some trouble in terms of testing with the audiences, but when they put that song in there, it seemed like it lit a fuse and it connected with a lot of the fans. Kathy, what did you think about the movie?
Well, as soon as I knew that we were going to have some of the members on here, of course, I then had to go back and listen to Gangster's Paradise because that's exactly where my head went, right?
Yeah.
And it's funny, like I just rewatched it before the show just to kind of get a refresher of anything. And it's hilarious and kind of interesting to look back at where we were when it comes to movie styles and things that were promoted and said and things that weren't even thought about back then that would be controversial today. So no, I thought it was a great movie then. I still think it's a great movie now.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it was a different time. Obviously, you know, there were these teaching movies were kind of in the domain there. We had, you know, Higher Learning and Stand and Deliver and Lean on Me with Morgan Freeman, who kind of came before that movie. And, you know, while they were all good movies, and, you know, I have those movies too, but they didn't have quite the impact with Generation X that I think Dangerous Minds did. And obviously having someone like Michelle Pfeiffer star in your movie certainly counts for something. You know, that's going to generate some eyeballs. And, you know, she was riding high at the time as well with some other movies. But Noel, what did you think?
I kind of thought it was like the 90s version of To Serve with Love. My parents kind of, well, my parents were hippies. Not saying that was a hippie movie, but that was that era. And so I remember To Serve with Love. And so I seen Dangerous Minds when it first came out in 95. And I seen it again just recently, just again, refresh myself on it. But I thought it was kind of like the newer version of To Serve with Love. It was kind of very similar, a lot of similarities there, actually. It was a good movie. It's a good movie.
Yeah, you know, having, you know, doing some research on the film and seeing what the reaction was online and everything, you know, you see a lot of good things, you see a lot of bad things. You know, we all have that nostalgia. You know, we like to look back at things with that layer of nostalgia on it. And I think Dangerous Minds is no different. You know, before I rewatched it, you know, I had that nostalgia that you know, certain, you know, it just brought me back to that time there. And you know, when you rewatch the movie, you know, there's things that you don't recall or remember that even happened in the movie. I mean, you know, even you know, actually one of the cast members has passed away since the film came out. It kind of mirrored what happened in the movie. You know, his character actually passed away in the film as well. And you know, hopefully we can get Luann here on a couple moments to talk about that. But you know, it perhaps is not. It wasn't the most artistic movie. You know, it didn't check all of the boxes. Now that I look back at it and rewatch it, you know, it's not going to pass for. It wasn't Boys in the Hood or, you know, New Jersey Drive, you know, which were blockbusters back then, and a lot of people remember those movies a little bit more fondly. A lot of people today seem to take issue with the storyline, but you know, I thought at the time, and look, we have the author Luann Johnson with us here right now. Thank you so much, Luann, for joining us today. It is such a pleasure to talk about the movie. How are you doing?
Sorry, I've been having computer problems.
Oh, no worries. Oh, no worries here. Perfect timing, just like the movie. You know, the movie came in at perfect timing as well. I was just about to say, you know, some people, you know, the movie has its faults, and some people were criticizing it. I noticed when I was plugging the show earlier this week, you know, they were saying, you know, a white teacher who comes into the ghetto and tries to save the kids, the ghetto kids. But you know, the movie was based on a true story, and it's based on your story, Luann. And it's a story that I thought was needed to be heard because it was true. And can you share with us, you know, the book that the movie is based on, and the process, you know, from, you know, when you got the book published to when they called you to talk about the film?
Well, that's a big question. Actually, you know, I have to tell you, I had a student that said that to me one time. She said, "How come it's always a white teacher coming in and say the polio black kids?" And I said, "I can't help it if I glow in the dark. It's the way I was born." That's the smart ass answer. But the real answer is we don't have enough black teachers. And there are black teachers out there doing the same things. But number one, they don't get published at that time. Nobody would publish their story. There wasn't a market. Like they don't read. The same thing with Hispanic. You know, you can write a book about Hispanic kids and people go, well, there's no market for that. Well, there is now, but you know, they still, anyway, it's the power structure thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the reason that I did well with my students is because I had no experience. I grew up in ultra white, conservative, Northwestern, rural Pennsylvania. And I think we didn't have access to movies. We didn't go out to eat. I never ate in a restaurant. I never stayed overnight anywhere. I saw first time I saw somebody who wasn't white, I was 17. And I was just interested. I thought, oh, what an interesting, you know, I was very intrigued. I didn't have any background. And I'm sure people in my town, now that I go back and I talk, there are a lot of bigots there, but I didn't know it because there wasn't anybody to talk about at the time, so it never came up in conversation. And then I went, I was a very shy kid. I was very introverted. And so actually shy, and I talk about that a lot. They're different things. Shyness comes from lack of confidence and, you know, maybe fear, where introversion is just a character trait where you derive your energy from being alone and thinking, and other people tire you out. So, but I was really stubborn. But I had one of those fathers. It was like, I'm the king of the castle and you do what I say, or, you know, wham. So that bothered me a lot because I was an independent kid, but and he would say, "You want a backhander in the teeth?" And I'd say, "Yeah." And he'd go and hit me. So, so I knew what that felt like. And then I fought with him a lot because he was so bossy. And I went off to college right after high school, but I had no experience. So I went home after a month. Because I went to a frat party. I didn't know what a frat was. And a guy tried to rape me. And I just went home because I thought it was my fault because I drank alcohol. So I didn't say anything. I just went home and I said to my mom, I don't know how to go to college. So she went down to the post office and came home with a brochure from the Navy. And she said, "Look at here, I think they let the girls drive the boats now. And you could join the Navy and it wouldn't be just a job, it'd be an adventure." And I didn't know anything. I mean, I was a shy, inexperienced kid, right? So send me off to the military. She said, "But you can be a journalist. They'll train you to be a journalist and they'll pay for you to go to college." So I said, "Oh, and I will get out of my dad's house." So, so I went, and all the drill sergeants were just like my dad. So I was used to them. That. And then when I spent probably the first 6 months in the Navy crying because at that time they didn't want to let me be a journalist because I was a woman, and guys would say filthy stuff and harass me and hate me. Literally, some of them literally hated me, and I had never done anything. So I had a feeling what that felt like. And then I decided to go to college and become a professor to teach literature. I thought I'll talk about books all day with people who like to read. But then I decided just to teach high school for a year, just to see what kids were like. And they gave me these kids that they said were unteachable. Nobody wanted them. And I thought, you can't just throw people away. And I recognized a lot of the behaviors were like what I was. They were angry. They were upset because they weren't allowed to have opportunities. They weren't stupid, but they were told they couldn't do things because of who they were, what they looked like. And they didn't feel loved, and so, and I didn't have any background, except in the Navy. I had been stationed in the Philippines, so I could speak a little Tagalog. I also got to see people of all different colors and realized that you have to do them duck by duck. Zora Neale Hurston says that you have to look at people duck by duck. And so I was interested in my students, and I remember this one boy, he walked in the door and he said, "Oh, I don't like white people." And I said, "Well, God, that's not fair." I said, "I can't change the color. I know I glow in the dark, but my whole family does." So, and he just went, "Oh, whatever." He was just too cool. And I said, "Look, just cut me some slack, okay? Just decide whether you hate me based on the way I treat you, and I'll do the same for you." And he didn't talk to me for about a year. I had the same kids 3 years. And at the end of the third year, I asked them to write in their journals what they had, the most important thing they learned. And he said, I learned that not all white people are bad. And I felt like that was a huge compliment.
Wow.
And he actually wrote to me about 10 years after he graduated. He sent me an email. He said, I was thinking about you today. And I thought, wow, that's the last thing I thought. And he said, I came every day just to see if we could make you quit. You never quit, so I didn't quit. And he said, I figured you can hang in there, I can hang in there. And the funny thing was, he was really angry. He was like, he was Black Lives Matter back in, 1992. And he was always talking about the police stopping him for, things that didn't matter and getting it, harassing him. And I'd say, did you file a complaint? He'd say, if I do, they'll come after me. And I said, then you have a civil police lawsuit. You got to fight this stuff. And he would go, you don't know what you're talking about. And he was just angry all the time. And I understood why he was angry. But, and the one thing that he complained about was detectives following me around in stores when he wasn't doing anything. And it just, it irritates me when they do that. You want to just, you just want to turn around and slap them. So he spent his whole life just wanting to slap people all day long, which is exhausting. But he said, this is ironic. And I thought, well, that's interesting. He's using that terminology. He said, you'll never guess what I do for a living. He said, I'm a hip hop artist, but I'm also a store detective. And sent me a picture of himself with Martin, But anyway, he was funny. But his big shades, he always wears shades, he's like, anyway, that was funny. So when I started teaching, I had a different attitude. And I also wasn't an education major. I was 35 when I started teaching. I'd been in the military. I guess they thought, she can handle them. So they gave me these kids, and I had no curriculum. I had no supervisor, and I just went in, and they were just they weren't interested in me. I tried to introduce myself. They just ignored me. So I turned around to write my name on the board, and somebody threw a dictionary at my head. It bounced off the wall. I thought, whoa, one of the big red ones. So I turned around, and I could see the kid that had thrown it. He was standing in the back, giving me that look like, I don't care. And I'm thinking, oh, I've been there. So I just said, you know what, you guys, if you don't want to come to school, don't come to school. I'm never going to embarrass you. I'm never going to humiliate you. And I'm never going to make you read out loud, but I expect you to think. And if anyone dies from that, I'll take full responsibility for your death. They didn't know what to do. And one kid, he said, you ain't no real teacher. And I said, well, you know what? It doesn't matter. And one other kid said, you're crazy. I said, so you can be crazy and be a teacher. Don't you know any crazy teachers? And some of them are stupid. Am I right? And they just didn't know what to do. And I said, if you don't want to come to school, don't come to school. And they were like, well, we have to come to school. I said, no, you don't. Yes, we do. No, you don't. It's a law. I said, people break the laws all the time. You wear a seatbelt, you never speed. I said, there's kids out there right now stealing cars, selling drugs, making babies, drinking their dad's liquor, watching porn. You could go join them. And they're like, no, we can't. And I said, yeah, you can. No, I can't. I said, oh, why can't you? Oh, my mom will kick my butt. I said, well, you don't want your butt kicked, so you choose to be here. No, I don't. I said, well, I'll walk you across the parking lot so you can engage in your criminal career. If you want to be a drug dealer, I'm not going to criticize you because we have a lot of criminals in our government. And if they're white criminals, they don't go to jail. They get caught buying cocaine and they go to a golf course, and you get caught selling a little bit, and then you're going to go to prison forever, because that's how it works. So that's the way it is. So I'm not going to criticize you, but if you want to be a criminal, get out there while you're young. You can run fast and get going. And you can learn to read here, or you can learn in jail. But that's what a lot of people do there. They get an education. But I can teach you, how to read here. And if you can't read, it's not because you're stupid. It's because you didn't care about it when somebody didn't care enough to make you. So they didn't know what to do, because they were expecting me to send them to the office, and they would say, fuck. And I'm like, oh, I've never heard that. Ooh, boo-hoo. So they just thought they were going to shock me and make me quit. And that was the whole thing. And I didn't realize at the time, I thought they wanted me to quit because they didn't like me, or because I was a teacher. I didn't realize it was because they were afraid to like me because I might leave.
Yeah.
So they can't make an emotional investment in somebody that isn't going to give it back. So when they realized I wasn't going to quit, and I really liked them, then they decided to, they weren't going to beat me up.
Okay, now how much did your experience as a Marine help you in your teaching career there?
Well, actually, I spent 8 years enlisted as a journalist in the Navy. And I spent 1 year as an officer in the Marine Corps. And then I said, hey, this is not a good fit for me. I need to go back to the Navy. And they said, nobody says the Marines aren't good enough for them. And I said, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying this is not where I belong. I could not it's not that I couldn't, I chose not to take that level of sexual harassment every single minute of every single day. It's like, this is not the battle I want to fight. I'm not equipped for it emotionally. So I said, nah, I'm either going to go back to the Navy or I'm going to be a civilian. So we argued about that for a while. And then I actually resigned my commission, and they said, you can't resign. I said, well, I'm not asking your permission. I'm just resigning. And they said, you can't do that. And I said, well, then put me in the brig or kill me. I got kind of stuck. And so then I got my honorable discharge. So they wouldn't let me go back to the Navy. Yeah, it was the wrong place. And there was a captain there. I was a second lieutenant. There was a captain, and he did not think women belonged in the military, and he was going to get me. And every day it was just constant harassment, usually sexual, but sometimes just physical. And he was just trying to make me hit him. So he kicked me out. So I wouldn't hit him. I just said, I'm going to go somewhere where people appreciate me. But I have to say this, having been in a situation where I was told I couldn't do things, I couldn't even try because I was a woman, or to have people hate you, and then to have that kind of, just that, to be in a system, and the Marines were really a good example of being in a system where you are not valued, and you are demeaned repeatedly, and then you're expected to perform, and then criticized if you don't. So I knew I knew how angry a lot of I could relate. I could relate to their anger. So in that way, it did help me. And also, I have to say, when you go into the military, you don't have the self-discipline to stand while a fly crawls across your face and not move, or to have somebody stand and scream in your face and spit on you and you don't do anything. You have, so to be able to develop that level of self-control, I used to talk to my students about that. And I said, you don't have any self-control. And if you could learn even just a little bit, it was going to change your life. So one of the ideas is that if I criticize you about something personal about you, and you respond, I just controlled you. And so get them to realize that the people that are saying and doing things, that's what they want. They want to emotionally manipulate you, because if they can grab your emotion, it hijacks your brain. And they don't want you using your brain.
All right. Let's fast forward a bit to Dangerous Minds here. It's 25 years now. The movie generated over $180 million at the box office. What is your opinion of the impact of the movie?
Actually, I was really angry when it first came out because of the things that I felt were racist and the misrepresentations of my students. And a lot of them were upset. It's like, we weren't gangsters. A lot of them were gangsters when they came in, but they weren't allowed to be gangsters in our program. They had to, agree not to do those things for 3 years in return for learning how to use computers and, getting jobs and graduating. So, now I lost my train of thought.
The impact of the movie.
Oh, yeah. So, but I did have people, I had a friend, she's from Columbus, Ohio, and she wrote to me when she was a struggling single mom. She's Black. And she wrote to me and she said, I read your book, and I'm wondering how somebody so different from me, on such a different journey, how I can relate to you. I don't get how that happens. So I wrote back to her, and her name's Tawana Washington. She's now, she works at the college now, but we had a lot of discussions, and she was real honest about, she said, my mom told me you can be friends with black women to a point, but don't ever trust them because they're white and they'll stab you. Or she said, I can be friends with a white person. And I was like, I was surprised, but then when I thought about it, I thought, well, that doesn't make, that really isn't surprising. I'm sure there's white people who they give their kids that same idea. You can be friends with people, but to a point, you got to cut it off. But she told me, after I was bitching about the movie, and she said, oh, boo-hoo, they made a movie out of your life. Oh, poor little you. She said, I want to tell you, she said, back when I was growing up, she said, if there was a program that had Black people in it, my whole family gathered around it. We wanted to watch those shows. And she said, and of course, they never represented us fairly and real. But she said, in this movie, we got a little taste of to get to see ourselves.
Yeah.
And she said, people of color, and she said we were hungry to see ourselves. So it doesn't matter that it wasn't true and that they put their stereotypes in. We're used to that. She said, but we got to see ourselves. So
yeah, that is a huge point, a very huge point, because I was one of those kids that watched the movie in the theater and was amazed to see, you know, myself in there. You know, I resembled some of those kids, and you know, and I think that's a very important point. But let's get the panel in here to get their thoughts. They're chomping at the bit here. Cassie, go ahead.
Thank you so much for being on the show. By the way, first and foremost, one of your books that you wrote called "Making Waves."
Oh yeah, that was.
It didn't get published initially. It got published after.
No, that was published in 1986. That was my first book. I wrote that after I got out of the military.
Now, when you wrote that, like what started that? Like, so much was happening to you in your life and things, but were you writing it kind of like initially? Were you writing it as like a journal, kind of like therapeutic for yourself? Were you writing it right from the beginning to let people know?
I was angry. I actually wrote a book about what happened, my whole experience, the whole military thing about, you know, going in the Navy and then switching. And the reason I switched to the Marine Corps is I got hypothermia, and you know, they talked me into switching to Marine Corps OCS, where I did fine. But I was just angry about the harassment and the way that nobody would stand up for me. Because like when this guy would harass me, I would go to my supervisor and he'd say, I don't care what he said or what he does. I like you, but he's your superior officer, so take it. Like, you're going to let this guy rape me or beat me up or whatever. You're not going to stop him until after he does it. And then maybe, and I knew they wouldn't do anything. So I was angry. So I thought, okay, then I'll just write something funny. And I was actually, I didn't know how to write a book. I was a journalist. I wrote stories, you know, I wrote articles. So I wrote some stuff, and then I didn't know how to get it. I didn't know anything about publishing. And everybody's like, you can't write a memoir. Nobody writes in first person. You'll never get published. You'll never get an agent. I didn't even know what an agent was. So, and I was typing it on a typewriter, on a selector typewriter. So I wrote some stuff, and then I worked for a news service, and this lady came from New York City she was a PR agent. I'd never heard of that. And she took me out to lunch. I didn't know it was her, you know, it was her job to take me out to lunch. But I didn't, you know, I was like, oh, wasn't that nice of her to take me out to lunch? And she was really nice to me. And I was telling her, oh, I wanted to write this book and whatever. And she was an older lady. And when she got back, I wrote her a thank you note to thank her for taking me out to lunch, because my grandmother, you had to thank people and you had to put it in writing, and it had to be 24 hours. Yeah. So she called me from New York, and she had one of those gravelly smoker voices. She said, darling, nobody writes thank you notes anymore. And I said, well, my grandma made me do it. She said, well, I was thinking, you said you wanted to write a book. I have a friend, an agent, call Ruth Nathan. So I did. And this woman, she said, oh, you know, I like your stuff, and I'll be your agent. So I was like, oh, yay. So I sent the stuff off, and it was a few months later. I quit my job and went somewhere else, and I forgot about her. She tracked me down. She said, I'm trying to find you. She said, I got some feedback from St. Martin's Press. And she said, Tom Dunn. And he said, listen, she's amusing. She's a good writer, but these are just vignettes. It's not a book. There's no character development. There's no structure. There's no, and I said, oh, you want a book? Yeah. And I said, okay, I can do that. So I started writing, and then she called me and she said, oh, he wants to know how many words it's going to be. And I said, how many words are in a book? Yeah. She said, well, usually 70,000. I said, okay, 70,000. So they put this in the contract. She calls me and she goes, okay, we got an offer. He can only give you 5,000 for an advance, but it's better than a poke in the eye with a sharp stick. And I was like, 5,000, I would have paid them, you know, 500 to publish it. So they published, I sent the manuscript in, and I kept typing. And when I got to 70,000 words, I quit. I quit wherever it was. It had no ending. And that was the big thing that the critics had, was like, what did she do? Quit it so she could write a sequel? Because it doesn't end. We don't know what happened. But anyway, so that got published, and, you know, somebody wanted, oh, and this is interesting. I think it was Disney. Was it Disney or, doesn't matter. One of the major studios, Universal, somebody wanted to make a movie out of it. And it got up to the head of the studio who said, nope, we're not going to do a female buddy movie, because I wrote a lot about my roommate who was, we were just best pals, and stuff that, jokes we played on each other and things. He was, no, not going to do it. No, it won't. Nobody's interested in a female buddy movie. That was way before Thelma and Louise. So
Yeah.
there you go. And it was a memoir, and it was written in first person, and they said nobody's interested in your life. And I was like, but what I learned from that was I was really passionate. I was angry, but I thought, okay, angry women, you know how it is. You're just a bitch if you're angry. Am I allowed to say that? A biatch. Okay. But if you're angry, righteously angry, it doesn't matter. But if you can use a sense of humor to go around the back, then you can do the little zing. So I learned how to do that. So I did it that way. So anyway, there you are. So I used to tell my students that and whenever people ask me about writing, I say, write about something you really care about, and just don't listen to anybody else. Write it for one person. You're writing to one person who gets your jokes, who likes you. So you don't have to explain yourself. You don't write down to them, and just write it, and it will come through as an honest voice. So there you are.
And that was your first book, yes?
Yeah.
So then you wrote 9 other ones after that. So I guess you kind of got bit by the bug.
I was trying to, well, I wanted to be a writer in the first place. I wanted to be a literature professor. I was an accidental teacher. I fell in love with my students, so I stayed there, but I kept writing. And I wasn't thinking about writing about them. I was actually working on a novel. And every time I talked to Ruth on the phone, I would talk about my students. And then she said, well, why don't you write a book about them? And I said, what do you mean? She said, well, write a book about these kids. You're always talking about them. And I love them, and I don't even know them. And I said, I can't write about teaching. I've only been teaching 3 years. People say, who does she think she is? And she said, no, don't write about you. Write about them. I want to know their story. So I wrote My Posse Don't Do Homework. And one of the boys gave me that title because he said, my posse don't do homework, miss. It ain't cool. So I convinced him to do his homework. He's now a software engineer in Silicon Valley without going to college. He said, not going to college. I hate school.
Oh,
but
wow.
he can read and write really well. So I told him, I said, you don't want to go to college. Just make sure that when you get that opportunity, you can follow through on it. So.
Thank you very much for that. Over to you, Noel.
Yeah, so I was rather interested. 35 years old, you started teaching. So I have to ask you, what kind of motivated you to start teaching, at that point in time in your life?
I was working, when I left the military, I worked at a news service. And I know it's going to sound like a broken record, but there was another woman there and we worked in the sales department. We increased sales 125%. And they gave the guys in the news service a raise and wouldn't give us a raise. And we found out they were making a lot more money than we were. So we went to the editor and we said, how come these guys are getting paid so much more than us? And he said, because they might have a family to support. You can get married and have a husband to support you.
Oh, wow.
And we said, Charlie, that's not fair. We're doing the work. And he said, that's the way it is. So we both went and got other jobs. So I ended up, I thought, well, I saw the Xerox Research Center. If you've ever seen the Palo Alto Research Center, it's up on a hill. It's where all the, Steve Jobs worked there before, he made the Apple stuff. It's like all these genius guys, and it's brilliant, a beautiful facility with a gym and all these smart people. And I thought, oh, that'd be an okay place to work. So then I saw they had a job for an executive assistant, and I'd never been a secretary, but I thought I can type and I can answer the phone and I can learn. So I went in and this guy's interviewing me, and he's like, you could be an executive. I said, oh, I don't want to go to meetings. I don't want to drink cocktails. I said, I want to come to work, and I want to go home at 5 o'clock and play the piano. And I said, and by the way, he said, well, and he was looking at me, and I said, what's the problem? I know there's a problem. He said, well, I'm afraid you'll get bored. I said, I've never been bored in my life. You're going to give me a computer, and I'll be honest with you, when I'm not doing your work, which I will do really fast and I'll do it well, I'm going to write a book on your computer. I didn't know that was illegal. Same thing. After the interview, I sent him a thank you letter, and he and I wrote it by hand because I didn't have access to a computer at the time. He said, I have never received, and I had no idea. You don't do this at that level. He was the vice president of operations in, a big shot. And he said, I never received a written thank you note for an interview. And I said, well, you got one now. He said, well, would you like another interview? I said, yeah. So I went back and he was looking at me and I said, no, then we talked about it. So I wrote him another thank you note. So he called me and he said, oh, all right, you got the job. I did that job for about 4 years. I started doing some technical writing. And then I reached a point where I thought, no, it's not challenging enough. So what am I going to do? And my two choices were to become a teacher or become a naturopathic physician, because I was really into health and how food affects you and your emotions and, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And he was an old Jewish New Yorker. And he said, naturopathic physician? No, he said, they're quacks. Be a teacher, you'll do good.
He was right.
Oh, all right. So that's why I became a teacher. But what I was going to do was teach college. I thought, no, I can't deal with, kids. But I decided when I was there that I would teach that 1 year. And when they gave me those kids, I thought, man, this is not right. You can't just throw them away. So the following year, they started a program for at-risk kids. And they said, well, she likes them. So bring her in. And that's where I ended up. So.
No, that's very cool. Because actually, I do a bit of teaching, but in a different aspect. But what I find what you do is quite inspiring. Like, I really now quite admire you quite a lot.
So you
honestly
teach?
Say, very inspiring. Actually, I have one more question on a kind of the same kind of point. So, really, what was like the best advice you've been given about teaching in your experience? Best advice you've been given?
The two things. One guy in the movie, I did not run out of the room crying. You know that. If somebody, what actually happened was I backed that kid up against the wall and told him he could take one free hit before I killed him. And then he sat down. And then I explained to them that I wasn't going to kill him, although I knew how to do it. But I didn't. But they believed. Yeah. So I would not, that really irritated me. It's like, oh, come on. Yeah, that's what Marine Corps officers do when they're faced with a challenge. They cry and run out of the room. Oh, scared.
Really?
Would they have done it if it was a man? Anyway, so he goes out of the room, and then the guy
true, very true.
Yeah, like he would go, "Oh, boo-hoo." He bounces the chalk off her head, and he says, "You got to get their attention." That was one thing. It's like you cannot go in and just you can have the best lesson plan in the world. It isn't going to work if they don't like you.
Yeah.
If they don't trust you, they're not going to learn from you. You don't learn from people that you don't trust or that you don't like. You can regurgitate whatever, but it's not going to be a learning environment, that one. But he also said to me one really important thing. He said, never shout. He said, it's like trying to teach a pig to sing. It irritates the pig and it makes you look stupid. And I thought,
I like that.
And also when you do shout in a classroom, you might as well just write on the board, I gave up my power.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah. So I just didn't do it. That really helped me because I saw what happened with the teachers that did try to, people come in, oh, I'm not going to let them disrespect me.
Yeah.
And,
they turn off students at that point in time.
You got to give it first.
Trying to do, yeah.
And you have to give it and give it and give it to people that don't know what to do with it because they've never had it before and they don't trust it. And one kid said that to me. He said, man, you come in there acting like you're all nice, like you care about us. He goes, I'm thinking she got something up her sleeve because ain't nobody gonna be nice to you for nothing. You're gonna get something out of it or they're not gonna be nice to you. And I thought, whoa. And then, those perspectives were repeated to me so many times. I remember once I asked them to write in their journal about the nicest thing anybody ever did for him. And this one kid was sitting there for the longest time. And I said, what's the matter? And he said, I can't think of anything nice anybody ever did for me. And I thought, whoa. I said, nobody, and I'm not going to argue with him. It was probably true after I got to know him. So what they taught me was not to have any assumptions and to just listen and really look at people. That's what they responded to was somebody to just say, oh, tell me that story.
That's excellent. Yeah, thanks for that. And over to Anya.
Hello, and thanks for being here. It's been really fascinating so far.
Yeah.
When I was reading some older interviews and so on, and I read somewhere that after Dangerous Minds came out, that you actually quit teaching full time for a bit because of the notoriety, I guess.
Yeah.
That's accurate, or?
Yeah, they just wouldn't leave us alone, and they would come and do some kind of a news story and then twist it and say, you know, they would come in and talk to the kids. And then when they would do the story, they would go, these are poverty-stricken students with no future, and this is their and I'm like, you know, and then one kid, and always calling them at risk. And one boy came to me one day and said, what does that mean? What does that mean, at risk? And I thought, you know, I said, well, it means that you're probably a first generation person to graduate from high school. I said, I'd be considered at risk because my father dropped out of high school. But I knew he knew they wouldn't have applied it to me because I was a white woman. But they will apply it to anybody who's brown or poor and really white. I mean, really white and really poor, or both ways, right? So I stopped calling them at risk and I started calling them disenchanted. I said, they're disenchanted with the school system. They're not, we're all at risk. Every single young person is at risk of many things that are out there, all the dangers. But I think what really made me mad, I had a boy, who was a Hispanic boy, and he had dropped out of school. And then I had told them many, many times, just because you drop out or just because you go to jail or just because you go to juvie or whatever, your life is not over. As long as you're still alive, you can keep on trying. And this kid came back to school after he dropped out. I was so thrilled. He was not real literate, but he was working and was, what's the guy's name? Was it Montel? No. Oh, those talk show guys. It might have been one. I don't want to say it was him if it wasn't. Who else had shows at that time? There was Sally Jesse Raphael.
Yeah.
She made me really mad because I was supposed to go on her show, and I got one of my students who actually Gusmaro from the movie, the real kid. And he agreed, and I couldn't go to Los Angeles for some reason. And so they did me on a remote camera, and he was in the studio. And I thought, it'll be really cool for him, you know, gets to fly on a plane, stay in a hotel and all that junk. So they set him up on the screen, and then I wasn't on the show yet. And they had asked me different stuff about him, and I told them, you know, I gave him a lot of background about the kids. So they zoom in on a close-up of this kid and never warned him. And they said, so, Miguel, we hear you took a gun to school. And they freeze him. They don't let him speak. And then they cut away to a commercial or some such thing. And the story was, he weighed 90 pounds. There was this kid that was 6 foot something that worked with him and didn't like Mexicans and was harassing him all the time. This kid was 18, by the way. He was 21 when he graduated from high school. I managed to keep him in there and not break any laws until then. So he said, I got a gun in my locker. And I said, oh, no. I said, go get it and get it off campus. He said, it ain't loaded. Don't worry about it. And I said, no, I'm worried because you're going to go to prison because you're 18 and you got a gun on campus. So get the gun off campus and then come back and talk to me. So he gets off campus, comes back, and I said, you can't do it. You're going to end up, you know, yourself in jail. And I said, well, what are you doing anyway? He says, he told me about the guy. He goes, I wasn't going to shoot anybody. I was just going to stick it in his face and tell him to leave me alone. And I said, well, that's not going to work. So what we did was we got the big guys from our academy program that he went to school with to go and talk to that guy and tell him if you want to pick on somebody, pick on some guys their size. And that ended that. But they never gave him a chance to tell the story. They just zoomed in on him, went to a commercial break, and then came back. And I was like, no, you people don't care about these kids. You just want a rating. And the same thing happened when the other kid came back to school. I'm thinking it was, I think it must have been Montel. And we were supposed to go on the show. It was the time that O.J. Simpson, when they had the big chase down the freeway. Okay, so that happened. And so they came back. but we were all planned to go, and this kid was going to go be on TV, and none of his friends believed him. They all said, oh man, you know, that's not going to happen. You ain't going to go, blah, blah, blah. And I kept saying, yes, you are. Yes, you are. Don't listen to them. Well, they canceled it the last second. And I said, could you send this kid a t-shirt, a coffee mug, something from the show so he can show his friends? And they wouldn't even bother. They were too busy. They had to go do the OJ thing. I'm like, you know what? I'm not doing any more interviews because they don't care. They're not interested in their lives. They're not interested in making any changes in education. They just want the rating. And they're going to perpetuate the same stereotypes that I'm trying to break.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's the kind of story that will be taken the wrong way. You know what I mean? If they're just looking to sensationalize it or turn it into entertainment or whatever.
Right.
Definitely. I also noticed that even if you weren't teaching full time anymore at that point, but you found a lot of other ways to pursue teaching, or you do workshops, and also some of the other books you've written have been about education and so on. I wonder if you could talk.
Yeah, I did a lot of staff development. And the thing is that I always get really sick for like 3 days before I have to give a speech. Terrible digestive issues for days, and people would say, oh, you'll get over it. Well, I didn't, because it's just because really I am an introvert. It's and it's exhausting, but I did it because I wanted to change the way people taught. So I did it for the students, but I did it I thought, no, you know what, I just want to write about it. So I started writing books for teachers so that I wouldn't, but then they wanted me to go and talk about the books. So I did that, but then I went to North Carolina. I have a brother that lives there, and I lived there for a couple of years, and I taught ESL, which I really liked. And then I went to another community college, and I taught adult GED classes, and I taught literacy for adults that couldn't read. And then I would go back and like teach high school for a year somewhere. And if people, if people just left me alone, I'd be fine. But it was just, for a while, I just thought, oh, this damn movie will not leave me alone. It's like I went to one school and nobody knew me. And I was like, yay, they don't recognize my name. It's been a few years later. Just let me be me and see if you like me, right? So I told the principal, I said, please do not introduce me to the staff as, dangerous mind, just who I am, and let them decide for themselves. He couldn't do it. He waited till a couple of days before school started. He bought a bunch of one of my books, not the one for teachers. Then he had a staff meeting where I wasn't there, passed them out and said, you all should read this. She's going to work on our staff, and we're really lucky to have her. And there was these people sitting there, they've been there for 25 or 30 years, 35 years, and nobody's saying we're lucky to have you. And they had a lot more experience than I had, and a lot more, they didn't write books. And so people would say, sometimes teachers would say that to me, you ain't the best teacher in the world. I said, I never said I was. I know I'm not, but I don't have a life. I never have any dates. My stepkids are off with their dad, and I go home at night and write books. So it's true. I mean, I got divorced. I got married when I was in the Navy, and I was married to a mean person for 7 years. And then after I got divorced, I thought, no, okay. And then I tried it again. I didn't do very well. And I said, this is not a talent that I have. So I'm not going to do it anymore. So I decided to have dogs instead. And,
dogs and books.
Yeah. And then I taught ballroom dance for a while, and then I moved back into it. And then for the past 10 years, I've been teaching for a community college for a teacher education program, and I've been teaching online, and then I like it.
Yeah. Oh. And back to you, can I?
All right. We're talking with Luann Johnson, author, teacher extraordinaire, and on the 25th anniversary of the movie Dangerous Minds. In case Crossfire Nation viewers just joining us, Luann, let's get back to the movie here, because a lot of people watched that movie, and it had a huge impact on.
Yeah, and you asked me about that, and I didn't really tell you that I got so many letters from teachers that said, "Thank you for telling me it's okay to teach the way I do, teach from the heart, do what's right for the students, even if it's not necessarily what the rules would say." I should do. And I still tell people that now, although I can't tell them break the rules. I tell them to, if it's a choice between following every guideline to the T or doing what's best for your students. Do what's best for your students and be willing to say that. And then get your student, if they're on your side and they trust you, they're going to do okay on their standardized exams. If they can think, if they can read and write and think well, they're going to pass any test that you give them. So that your focus has to be on what's the best thing to do. Like and I also said, if you're teaching in a district where they want you to go to just teach to a test, you can do that, or you can say, I'm not going to do that, and give them the opportunity to keep you, which is what I did. I went to my principal and I said, you can fire me now, but I'm not doing it. We are not going to spend all our days working on one test. So we're going to read and write and think, and I think they're going to do just as well. And he said, they better. So at the end of that semester, fortunately, they did okay. But, you know, but there, lots of teachers wrote to me and said, thank you, because talking about scotopic sensitivity, which was a big issue. So many kids that can't read because of the lighting, the fluorescent lighting.
Oh, yes.
And that's something they didn't even touch on, and I wish they had. I don't know, maybe I didn't talk about it in Dangerous Minds. Maybe I did that in another book, but I had a student named Alex Gonzalez, and it was typical. I had a lot of kids that read it 2nd or 3rd or 4th grade, and they're in the 10th or 11th grade, and they think, oh, you know, I can never catch up, because they think it's going to take a year to make a grade level. You know, they don't know that you can go up to 6 grade levels in a year if you actually learn how to read. So this kid wouldn't read. I had lots of them. Verbal, if we're reading out loud, they follow along, they can read, but they won't read. And so finally one day, you know, I just got really mad because he was tearing the class apart. We were doing independent reading. He wouldn't let other people read. And I said, would you just sit down and read the damn book? I said, oh, sorry. And he said, okay. And he sat there for maybe 10 minutes. Then he walked up to my desk. He said, this is why I hate reading. And his eyes were bloodshot. Tears are running down his face. I said, what's going on? He said, this is what happens. And I said, well, what's going on? He said, I don't know. This is what happens. So I called his mom, and they had health insurance. So we went to an eye doctor, and the doctor said, I don't know what's wrong with him. So I mentioned it to everybody I knew, trying to find anybody that knew something. And a woman at that time I was in California, and she was teaching at a community college, and she was doing special ed services for adult learners. And she came to my classroom, and she brought these transparencies. I actually have some here. I just gave some to a lady the other day. They're different colors, and you put it over the page. And when you put it over the page, it drastically changes the contrast.
Yes. Yeah.
So I mentioned this to my students, and I said, you know, maybe you have a light sensitivity. And if so many of them said it gave them a headache or stomach ache or whatever, so, you know, so then teachers would go, yes, and they would share their anecdotal evidence. And so other teachers that were at these conferences could hear that and then go back and help those students. So in that way, you know, it motivated some teachers. I think it inspired a lot of people to become teachers. I think a lot of, and I got a lot of letters from kids, letters from kids of color who said, if they can do it, I can do it. So it motivated me because, like you said, they saw themselves. Like,
absolutely. You know, and you know, I'm one of those kids, you know, so I can definitely relate to that. But not just the kids and the teachers and even the system, I guess, that benefited from these, you know, from the movie, but also the actors. You know, talk about, you know, going onto the set, working with Michelle and the actors and that sort of thing.
Well, I only got to visit the set once. They wouldn't let me talk to the students. They didn't want. It was just a weird situation. They said that I was difficult. I did meet them once, so I got to meet Brooklyn Harris and
let's shout out Renoli Santiago.
Yeah, Renoli.
He wasn't able to make it.
Yeah.
Shout out to Renoli.
I got to meet them. You know, I got to meet them and talk once very briefly, but then one of the producers came over and said, "Oh, it's going to be so exciting. We're going to have a scene in the movie where you get fired for sexually harassing a student." And I was like, "What? What? No, you're not." She said, "Oh, yeah." And I said, "No, we're not." I said, I don't, you know, and she said, "Well, some of these boys are 18 and they're really cute." And I said, "Whoa, we're on another planet here." I said, "I'm not a predator. I'm not a child molester. I don't have sex with students." She said, "Well, some of them are 18. I said, "I don't care how old they are. I'm twice as old as they. I'm old enough to be their mother. But even if I weren't, I don't sleep with students." I said, "You can't put this in the movie. You're saying it's a real story." I said, "You know, but I got angry. And she said, well, we bought the rights and we can do it if we want to. And I said, well, then I'll see you in court. I don't have any money, but I'll find a lawyer that'll work for me. And, you know, because I was angry. So they said, well, don't talk to her. And they wouldn't talk to me after that. So, but I have to say this, Michelle Pfeiffer came to my classroom for 3 days. She came and sat in my room with my students and interacted with them. She, you know, it was funny because she didn't wear any makeup. She wore a black motorcycle jacket, just put her hair up with like a, you know, pin through it. And she's sitting in the back of the room with some sunglasses on and just watching. And
sounds like Coolio's video.
Yeah. So this kid sidled up to me and he said, hey, ain't that cat woman back there? And I said, yes, it is. And he goes, damn, what happened to her? She looked good in the movie. Oh, anyway. But I was trying to, at the time, I created a nonprofit corporation and I was trying to collect money because I wanted to start my own school for at-risk kids called Second Chance Ranch. I bought 40 acres out in the middle of nowhere. I was going to have them come and take care of horses and, you know, and I thought they'll be way far away from town. And if they decide to run away, they'll have to walk across the desert. And by the time I catch them, I'll just say, would you like a drink of water? But,
was that the Second Chance Ranch?
Yeah. And so these lawyers in Las Cruces put it all together for no money. That's when I thought I was going to make lots of money from the movie. So I wrote to the movie guys and I asked them for a donation, and Jerry Bruckheimer sent me $250 on behalf of 250, and Michelle sent
and
me.
how much did the movie make? How much did the movie make?
186 million. And Michelle Pfeiffer sent me 10,000 personal check for 10,000.
Oh wow. Okay.
And she really cared, and she read the book, and she got in a fight with them because she wanted to follow the book, and they said no actress tells us what to do. Blah blah blah. Make some headlines, but it was a sad situation because I'm not. Well, see, I don't have the. I don't know what it is. I tend to be just straightforward and honest. So like when I did meet people in Hollywood, they were like, "We'll have lunch," and I thought, "Oh, great!" I thought they meant it. And, I'm here like writing down their name and number. I'm thinking, "Oh, that'll be great," And everybody said it, and they just
yeah.
So it was a weird experience. But then when they would say things like that, I didn't realize that the script changes every single day, and they're thinking about putting in a thing. But when they tell me that I'm going to have an affair with my student, I go, "No, I'm not," and you can't put that in there. And then as soon as you try to tell them what to do, then they get pissy. So it wasn't good.
But it did impact the actors, though. It did impact the actors. I know Ranoli
because a lot of them weren't professional actors. They were kids off the street, and they went to these other places, and they got to be in a movie. And
Ranoli went on to do Hackers. He went to do Con Air, starred with Angelina Jolie.
He had a lot of talent.
He's doing a lot of stuff even today. Brooklyn Harris, Ebony Cerrito, who became a writer in New York City. I mean, the influence of the movie.
It gave them an entree into some places that they would not have had otherwise.
Exactly, and to tie it all around, we're on the internet here talking with someone who watched the movie as a student, one of those students, like in the movie, and here we are talking, 25 years later about the movie, about the movie. I think that to me is if that is an impact, I don't know what is, because a lot of those other movies like Stand and Deliver, Lean on Me, a lot of those teaching movies didn't quite have the impact that your movie did. That's saying something. Yeah,
there just was a lot of love on both sides, and in fact, I still get lots of emails from those same students today.
Yeah, it is amazing. All right. Okay, let me throw it to Cass here. Go ahead.
So with the pros and cons of the movie, like the movie was a huge success and it helped so many people, both the cast members who acted in the movie and also people who watched the movie. So many positives in that regards. But then you yourself had some negative experiences with the movie. So if we were to merge all that together, would you do it all again?
That's a great question. You know, because you told me, Luann, you said you have the rights to the book, right? You have the rights to.
Yes, I just got the rights back last week. I'm so excited because now I can self-publish it again under My Posse Don't Do Homework, which is the original title. And I think it'd make a great TV show. I mean, they tried to do the series and they did the same thing. They said they were going to have me get fired for, sleeping with a student. I'm like, why do you guys have to focus on that? It didn't happen and it's not going to happen. And their lives were, and they said, well, we have to make it dramatic. I said, you don't think these lives are dramatic?
Really?
They are definitely,
it's ironic, yeah.
Yeah, the drama. Would I do it again under the exact same circumstances?
Yep.
No.
What would you change?
No, but if they, if they learned, if they came out with an idea, they corrected a lot of those mistakes. They gave you an actual cut, a proper cut of the revenue. They brought you on board.
The money wasn't as important to me as telling the truth, telling the real story, and not demeaning me and the students, and not using them as a way to just, like, for example, there was so much swearing in the movie, and they did not talk that way in my classroom. I wouldn't allow it. But what I found was if you say the F-bomb enough times, you get an R rating. And they thought, if we get an R rating, then kids will still sneak in to see it, but then men will go see it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there were tricks of the trade like that.
That's their thinking. Instead of their focus was not on the students and on their story. And I get that. Now, so if I had a different agent and I was able to have some input into the movie and it was a little closer to their real story, then yeah, I would, definitely do it again. And the money's nice, but obviously you don't become a teacher because you want to be a millionaire.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we should all be working in a bank. That's where they keep it.
And one critic wrote a thing and said, "Oh, she went in and wrote a journal. What do you say? And then sold it to Hollywood and then retired with her millions." I'm like, where did this guy get his information? Yeah, I my students had journals. I gave them journals so that they could just download. Every day when they came into class, they had the journal and we had a writing period and they didn't want to do it. And I made them write a page. I said, you guys don't know how to articulate your thoughts. I don't care how you spell, we can fix that, but you've got to learn how to say what you mean. So 10th graders had to write a page, juniors had to write 2 pages, seniors had to write more than 2 pages. And they complained and whined and everything. So after about a month, I said, okay, fine. We aren't going to write anymore. And I took journals back and then they were like, ooh. You know what? I like that down time. Let me come in here and like bring it down. And also, when they were angry, they could come in and put that all down on the page. I said, I don't care what you write in there. Just write it. And I said, and if you don't want me to read it when it's done, if it's personal, you just show me the page. Hold it up. Show me the page. I'll give you credit in the book. I'll give you full credit, and then you can throw it away. So, but I have to tell you this. This is one of the most important things I ever learned. Oh, I told them that in their journal, at first, I didn't tell them to tear the page out. I said, if you don't want me to read it, just fold that page over. And then I'll just look to see it's a full page and I'll give you full credit. And that was when I first started them out. So I had all these journals. I had 250 journals. And I kept them in these bins. So I was going through this one class and I'm grading them. And I opened one. It was a kid that never talked to me. It wasn't Eric, but it was another kid. And I thought, oh, yay, gonna make that connection. And I opened up the journal and he had folded the page over. And I was like, oh, damn. I just gotta look. I gotta look. And I opened it up and he wrote, I knew I couldn't trust you, you fucking liar.
Wow.
And I said, he's right. He's right. He can't trust me. So after that, I was like, okay, I never did. I never turned another page if they told me not to. And then I told them they could tear it out. But man, they just get you. They have such a good BS meter.
Now you weren't like a regular teacher. So how did you know like all these different techniques and how to bond with the kids and how
psychology major.
And so that was the trick. Like, was it, like, you just strike me as the kind of person who, it wasn't you found teaching really found you.
Yeah.
And it was your natural niche kind of a thing,
Yeah, I thought about that, and I realized that, and it might have been my psychology background, or it might have just been my mom was like an amateur psychologist. But I realized after, people kept asking me, what'd you do? And I had to look back, and I tried to articulate. I'm like, well, you just do it. And I had to force myself to try. They'd say, well, okay, here's what happens. When somebody stands up and says, I'm not going to do this stupid shit, what do you do? So I realized that when kids were doing things that I didn't like, instead of trying to make them do what I wanted, I tried to figure out why they were doing what they were doing, and how could I get them to want to do something different. And that was the whole, I think it was that shift. It's in the default setting for everybody, but particularly teachers, is to notice what's being done wrong. And it's what we all do, no matter where we go, no matter what it is. We see a car, it's beautiful. Oh, it's got a scratch. We see whatever. And if you're a parent, your kids maybe behave all day, and the one time they do something, you focus on that, and that's what you remember for that day. So in the classroom, you have to change that default setting to noticing what they're doing right and acknowledging it. And people, oh, well, that's fake. And no, I'm not saying that you tell them, oh, this is wonderful. You just thank them. You just acknowledge, hey, I see that most people have their books out. I appreciate that. Thanks. And the ones who, then you're not embarrassing the kids that are too cool for school so that they have to close their book. But you just acknowledge that, thank you. You don't have to come in here and cooperate. I appreciate it. And you just, and if somebody is a troublemaker and they're just a pain in the butt every day, all day long, instead of constantly getting on them or calling the parents and, whatever, you just keep watching and watching and watching and try to give that kid one opportunity to do one little tiny thing that's decent. And then you jump on it and you call their parents and you tell them, oh man, they did this great thing today. And you tell them, I noticed you did that. It was good. It was good. I appreciate it. I saw it. And a lot of times you have to be careful though, if you're working with the, disenchanted kids, you can't acknowledge it in front of anybody else, because then they'll stop doing it. You got to do it privately when they're on the way out of the room. Hey, I saw you did that. It was good. It was good. So that they know you saw them, but nobody else saw that they were doing something nice.
They can keep their rep.
Yeah, because they can't be vulnerable. Because it's true. One kid told me, he said, I went to 9th grade. He was in Los Angeles. He said, I'm short. He said, I looked around at those guys and I thought, they're going to kill me. I went home. He said, I never went back to school. He was in the movie, so he got to get his GED while he was on the set, which was good. But, cool. I bet nobody asked him, or I bet he never told anybody. The reason he left was because he thought they would hurt him. Yeah.
And he just told you that?
Yeah. Well, yeah, because
that's amazing.
I just went over and I just asked him, I would just say, what's your story? And a lot of times you get that, what do you mean? I said, what's your story? And they'll tell you if they think you really mean it. Or they'll say some BS just to see if they can shock you. Ooh, okay. Ooh.
I remember the first time I watched a movie, and I wasn't in school to be a teacher. I didn't see that in my path of life, none of this at all. And I went and did my degree in cross-cultural studies, and I started to travel, and I was just teaching English. And I ended up over in South Korea, and the kids over there, they're looked down upon if they are known to have like a different learning disability, right? If they're on the spectrum for like Asperger's or whatever the case, it's not made known. If they don't go to the doctor. Sorry, my dog.
Now my dog said, what's going on? What is that?
He just heard a dog walk by the window.
It was Luann's dog.
Oh my God. He's a big man over in the window now. Sorry about that. Oh,
Yeah.
yours is so cute.
She came to live with me because she ran away from home so many times they wouldn't take her back. Yeah.
Oh.
She's an
Stars
at-risk
born.
dog. So go ahead.
As I was saying, before I was really interrupted by my dog. I needed to learn different ways to teach these kids. And I wasn't allowed to say, I believe this kid is acting in this certain way. I wasn't allowed to bring any attention to it at all.
Oh, wow.
And so it was your movie that came back to mind. And I thought about the same thing that what you just pointed out. I didn't know what was happening with these kids. They were never ever diagnosed as having a learning disability or anything ever. I never knew what I was dealing with. I was just thrown into this class and told to teach these objectives in English. Some of these kids did or didn't speak English. Some of them spoke broken English, Korean, and I did not speak Korean. And so it was a situation, and it was your movie. And the fact that I would jump on one positive thing, kid, even half of a positive, I would just jump on that thing. I would celebrate that to no end. And I became known as Crazy Cassie Teacher because that's what I would do.
Yeah.
Nuts, right?
Crazy compared to the norm.
Yeah, and it was because I didn't know what to do, and I wasn't given the tools to do it, and we weren't allowed to use tools to make the kids stand out or properly help them. And yours is straight.
Quiet, sweetie, quiet. Good girl, quiet. Good.
Go ahead, Kev.
But yes, no, I want to say thank you because your movie, like I said, when I watched it because everyone was watching it at the time, and it was a huge thing. And Gangster's Paradise was a huge song, and the whole thing was huge at the time. But I didn't know where I was going in the future. And then it's so funny how sometimes the brain operates. And I remember watching the movie, and it came back to me. And there's so many different things in the movie that I didn't understand, obviously, but that one thing at that time in particular was a saving grace to me because I was way in over my head. So as a person that you helped, your story helped through the movie. I want to say thank you very much.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I'm excited to hear that.
And over to you, Noel.
Oh, well, thank you. Show's actually becoming now a very, very good teacher seminar I've noticed here tonight. Really good, really informative too, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
I really love it. So as a teacher, I just want to ask you, do you have a favorite success story in your case?
Probably a lot to choose from, Lorraine.
I can think of
You have like one solid one, your best one ever.
Yeah, in fact, I was talking to a woman just yesterday. She has a grandson who's ADHD, and she wanted to know what I thought about it. And I said, I think there's a very, very small number of people that actually have something, a processing disorder where they literally can't pay attention. But for most kids, it's sugar, chemicals, food dyes, boredom, emotional issues, teachers who don't really like them, material that's not engaging to them, and you don't know which one that is. There's a Fine Gold has a diet, and they have a little experiment on there where they took these mice, and they had these kids in elementary school teaching the mice how to go through a maze, and they timed them and kept charts and all that for their math, and then they put just a quarter of a teaspoon of yellow food dye in their water. And the mice that drank that water became slower and slower and less able to go through the maze. And as they kept drinking that water, then they started attacking each other and became very aggressive. And then once they took the yellow dye out of their water and put it back into purified water, they also got something like 10 to 100. It was a major amount slower than the other ones. Their brains wouldn't function. When they went back to pure water, they eventually gained back their ability to get through the maze and to use their brains. I'm like, that's just a little bit of yellow food dye. If you look at all the crap that kids eat, that's one thing. And then they don't sleep. They have exposure to too much, computers. They have nobody loves me, blah, blah, blah. But I'm not a big, and I didn't know what ADHD was. I'm like you, Cass. I went in teaching, and like, I remember the first time this kid pulled my hair, and I turned around and I said, what's with that? And he said, oh, I can't help myself. I said, what do you mean? He said, I'm BD. And I said, what's that? Bored to death? He said, no, I'm behavior disordered. I said, what? He said, yeah, I can't control my behavior. I said, that's BS. You've been in my class for months. I'm going to let her out. Come here.
Wow. We're talking here with Luann Johnson, the author of My Posse Don't Do Homework, and whose book was based on the movie Dangerous Minds. Go ahead, Luann.
So I said, you've been in my class for months and you behaved yourself. Don't tell me you can't control yourself. He said, well, it's a disorder. I have to take special classes. I said, well, what do you do in there? Do you learn how to control yourself? He said, no, we bake bread and make money. I said, that's BS. I said, don't let somebody tell you that you can't behave. You're in charge of yourself. Yeah. And I've seen you do it. So you need to do it in here and then you can earn a good grade. Because if you can't, then I don't want you to stay in my room. So you decide. And you're not a loser. Don't let somebody turn you into one by giving you a label saying, I said, nobody's going to want to marry you, be your friend, date you, hire you, be your neighbor if you don't have any control, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, so I didn't know what ADHD was. And I had a student, and he was a junior, and I could tell he had really severe dyslexia. He couldn't spell anything. So I didn't give him any spelling tests. But I did have independent reading, and I didn't realize that he was supposedly ADHD. So they had to read for 40 minutes. In my class, they had to read a novel. It was a big project. And then they had to do something at the end, a presentation in a paper, whatever. He sat in that room and read The Hobbit, and he read the trilogy. Wow. And he talked to me about it. And he was really bright. And when he got done, he did a verbal, he did a presentation for me, and he ended up with an A. Wow. And I heard him at the open house. He was in the hallway with his mom, and he said, Mom, you're embarrassing me. And I didn't know why. And she came in, she sat down, she said, well, I'm really concerned that Joseph has an A in English. And I said, well, he earned it. She said, well, I don't know how he could earn an A. He's got dyslexia. And I said, well, I know he can't spell. She said, well, doesn't he have to take spelling tests? And I said, no, not in my class. She said, but this is English. And I said, well, he can't spell. So why would I give him a spelling test? She said, well, all the other English teachers do. And I said, oh, well, I didn't know you're, I was like, I can't say, I don't know how to be an English teacher. I said, well, I didn't give him spelling test because he can't do it. To me, that's like telling a kid with one leg, he's got to run a race against people with two legs.
Yeah.
And she said, well, yes, but he got an A in other things. And I said, well, he read The Hobbit and the trilogy, and he did this brilliant oral report. And she said, well, are you sure? And I said, yes, I watched him read every day. And she said, well, he has ADHD. He can't focus for more than 10 minutes. And I said, well, I saw him every day reading this. And she said, well, he told me he didn't want to take that medication, but I thought he was just being a teenager. And, she started crying because, like a lot of parents, she's been told by the experts that something's wrong with her child. So they limit their expectations. Yeah. But fortunately, a lot of kids will, fight back. And so I was just really happy that he thought he was an intelligent person, and he went on to go to college. And, wow. His mother stopped thinking that he was not capable of doing things.
Yeah, yeah. That's a huge statement too. I mean, that's kind of the human spirit right there. We kind of rise above those kind of confinements kind of people kind of put upon us, really, and they're rising above it all. That's a huge statement there.
And I just got an email. I got an email a couple of months ago from a student, and the funny thing is, I taught at this one school for a semester. They had a long-term sub open, and and I did my old, my same old motivational things. And I was so upset because it was in Alamogordo, New Mexico, and they had a holy book burning. They literally gathered on the street to burn Harry Potter and Shakespeare because they said they knew it was the devil. They hadn't read them, but they knew they were preaching Satanism. And I went like, oh, bonkers in class. And I said, oh my God, you guys. And they were really, really, really anti-gay. And I said, if you're gay, get out of this town. There's places you can live where people don't want to kill you. You can have a happy life. Trust me, the world is big, and this town is not the place to live if you're gay. And I was always telling them, I don't care if you don't have money. if you can read and write and you're willing to work, somebody will pay for you to go to college. You just have to be able to do the work when you get there. But there's people, and if you're brown, they will pay you. Trust me, you just have to do it. And I said, and you can do it, blah, 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 every day, all day. Anyway, this kid was quiet, never really talked to me. And he wrote me, said, I just wanted to tell you how much of an impact you had during that semester that you were my teacher. He said, I was a poor, fat, gay kid in Alamogordo and Mexican. And he said, I thought, what are my options?
Right.
Not very much. He said, but you kept saying, you can do, don't let other people tell you what you can do. You can do things. He said, so I decided to try to go to community college, and I did. He said, and then when I went to college, he got a scholarship to go somewhere, and I can't remember where it was, Tennessee or somewhere. And he said, everybody was white. And then he goes, that was a real experience. And he said, but I kept hanging in there. And then he said, you wrote that book, Muchacho, about the Mexican kid. And he goes, I read that book. And he said, I took it to he said, I started dating a white girl, which was a real weird thing. Wait a minute. Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I said he wasn't gay. That was another kid. He said, I took it to her house, and her mother saw the book, and she asked me about my life. And she had never known anybody who was poor. And he said, it was he said, I was embarrassed at first, but she said, no, money is not something to be embarrassed about. It's just, what you're born to. And he said, she was so kind, but he said, I kept on going, and he got his PhD.
Wow.
And I'm a college professor.
What?
Wow.
He said, I walked across that stage, and he said, they have to call me doctor.
Nice.
And I was like, yay.
No
Wow.
He just hung in there. And I'm thinking, it's one thing I tell a lot of teachers is, you can make a small comment, and to you may not even remember you said it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
They hang on to that. And
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, you're also kind of planting seeds with students, and that's a great success story right there.
Yeah. And and I'm sure I said things to him. I remembered him when I looked at his picture. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember you, quiet kid. But he just didn't think he didn't think he could do it.
Yeah, it's possible. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then I know he'll be a professor, and there'll be students that go there and they see, here's a Mexican American college professor. So I can do it. I can do it too.
They can do it too.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, over to Anya.
Thank you. I was reading an older interview. I think it was in People magazine at one time. And you said something, I believe it was, you're talking about teaching. And you said, people forget what it was like to be a teenager. And I guess I just never grew up. Is that something that you still think? I mean, this is maybe a 10-year-old interview, so I'm not sure if that's
Well,
what
the thing it was because my dad was so dang bossy. And so you weren't allowed to have your own opinion. You weren't allowed to disagree. You weren't allowed to, get angry. You couldn't, I said, I want to be a playwright. I want to write plays. No daughter of mine's going to be involved in the theater. They're all drug addicts and whores. And, and I went to community college, and he found out I was in a play. So he drove his pickup truck to the college and took everything I owned and brought it back, threw it in the truck and said, you're going to stay out here till you're 21. That's why my mom went and, had me join the Navy. So I just hate people telling me what I have to do, telling me what I can't do. And I just have no patience for it. And so that's the thing when you're a teenager, is all day long, especially in school, the first day of school, you have 6 teachers, every one of them goes over the rules and tells you all the things they're going to do to you if you do something wrong. And I tell, teachers, if you went to a new job and everybody went in the conference room and they started listing what they were going to do to you, if you take supplies home, if you sexually harass somebody, your ass is grass. And if you take our staples, that's stealing, and you have an hour for lunch, and if you're late, you're going to get docked. If they started going through that, and you can't go to the bathroom, by the way, you can't go to the bathroom. You can go to the bathroom once every 3 months, but you need to have permission. You would not even stay. Most people wouldn't. A few people would go, I need the money, but I'm going to stay long enough till I can get another job.
Yeah.
But most of us would be out the door. And I say, why do we, so the kids are feeling like that. They're feeling, they're scared about the future. They're they have all kind of sex hormones going bonkers and hijacking their brains all the time. They've got people bullying them. They've got family issues, but they're mostly, I think their emotions, their primary emotions are fear and anger when they're in, unless, you know, the kids that I'm teaching in that population. It's like, man, and look at kids now. They're afraid of global warming. They're afraid of cyberbullying. They're afraid of, you know, if they're Black, they're afraid of being killed for just living. So, and they're angry about, and they can't articulate the anger in a lot of cases. And what they're angry about is that they know that this country has the ability to provide the best education, and they're not getting it. And they know that. They're not stupid.
Getting worse.
Yes, and they used to not have the access to the rest of the world, so they might not see what kids in Europe know. But they, you know, but they see, they see, you know, what's going on.
And it also, I mean, it's also coming from a basis of having just respecting your students, right? And how important that is to be able, you know, to gaining their trust and so on, as you were talking about earlier. That's number one, right? If you can't connect, they really won't listen.
And when I went to school, nobody asked us what we wanted to take. They gave us a schedule. They said, this is it. And if you don't like it, that's too bad. You will do it. And they hit us. They hit us if we did things wrong. And then they sent us home and our parents hit us. So I went through school angry most of the time, but then occasionally I had twice, once in elementary school and once in high school, a teacher that was a human being who looked at me as a human being and said, hey, you know, this is what I think your talent is.
Yeah, that's
one of my gym teacher in high school. She said something about Pittsburgh, and I said, I've never been there. And she said, what? And I said, she said, it's 2.5 hour drive. I said, well, we don't go to Pittsburgh. So she's like, oh, really? So she drove to my family's house, and she convinced my father to let her drive me to her family's home in Pittsburgh. And it was so exciting. And she was getting married. And so she drove me around the neighborhoods. I didn't know you could have your own tennis court and your own swimming pool. She drove me up in the hills. She said, this is where the rich people live, and this is how they live. She drove me downtown where there was bums on the street. You go, no, those guys didn't do their homework. And she said, it's a big world, man. It's big, and you can pick the place you want to live in. It's up to you. You decide which one of those, you know, where you want to go. But it's big. It's just way bigger than this town. So,
yeah. Thank you very much. Back to you, Kenai.
All right, we're almost out of time here, Luann, but I want to make sure that we get, because there's a lot of viewers watching right now, and you know they want to know about your books and where they can get them and that sort of thing. So let's count it down again. The main book here, My Posse Don't Do Homework. You mentioned earlier that you reacquired the rights for it. Where can they get the book?
That one, you know, the reason why I wanted the rights back was the publisher stopped printing it after they changed their name to Dangerous Minds. Okay. Now they put it, what they do to avoid having to give you back, because I asked for the rights back. So instead of giving me back the rights, they published it with a white, plain white cover with the words Dangerous Minds, and they put it on Amazon for $23.
Yeah.
For a little paperback that costs $4 or $5.99. Yeah. So of course nobody buys it, but they don't care. They just want to hang on to the rights in case something happens. So I got the rights back. So now I have to either find an agent and a new publisher or self-publish it. So right now it's just available. Well, there are some used copies floating around on places like, you know, Thrift Books and Alibris and used bookstores, but it is available on Amazon. And then Josie Bass publishes my books for teachers. Teaching Outside the Box is the main one. So that's available at, you know, Barnes and Noble. And like when I want to buy my books, I just go on and type my name in Google and then type the title, and then I find out where it's for sale.
Okay. All right. Well, that's definitely good. and so books like Muchacho and the other books you referenced, they can also look.
Yeah, Muchacho is definitely available, and that was published by Knopf.
Okay.
Yeah, so
right.
that's my favorite. I got to tell you, that's my favorite book.
Yeah, I love that book too.
I love it.
Amazing dialogue, and you know that's a book anyone of any age can read and relate to, and just kind of sit back and just glean
Yeah,
what
and
it
I
was like
think,
to.
some kids had to read Dangerous Minds for school, and a lot of the kids said, this book ain't written for kids. This is written for like old people because it's
Yeah.
talking about kids. But Muchacho
Yeah.
is written, it's a young adult novel, and it's written for them from their perspective. So,
All right.
yeah.
And of course, there's also your website too, luannjohnson.com.
Yeah.
So we can go on luannjohnson.com. We can also obviously look back at other materials as well. We can, because I think you had a blog on there at one point.
Yeah, sometimes I think, oh yeah, I have a blog. I got to go write something. So I've really gotten into the online teaching and course design, and and now that they're transitioning into online, it's it's scary for a lot of the teachers that aren't used to it, and so they're having to try to transfer their skills to an online environment, which it works. It's got its own challenges.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm excited about it actually, because I think what's happening, the COVID virus is, there's a lot of negatives. It's really sad. It's just heartbreaking, the number of people that are sick and dying and already dead. And just so many things, but there's some good things I think that are coming out of it. Number one, I think people finally got enough time on their phones that a lot of them are putting them down and talking to each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that people are eating more healthy. They're more aware of their physical health and what they can do to stay healthy. But as far as learning is concerned, I've been thinking that for maybe not the next generation, the generation after that, I don't think we're going to have physical school the way we have it now, where everybody comes in a bus and they gather. I think the learning is going to be online because it's so much information you can't possibly, replicate it in books. And it needs to be alive and evolving. I think we'll still have schools, and I think they need to be, they'll turn into like more of a community center where the kids are socializing, they're doing sports and arts and enhancement and tutoring and classes for parents and all those things, and providing meals for the kids that need them. But I think that a lot of the learning is going to take place online. So our focus now needs to be on making sure that we get internet access and computers to those students and make them available for them. Learning centers, not necessarily libraries, but just a learning center where they can go in limited numbers and do that. So I think it's exciting because I think that's the future of education. And online classes used to be like, correspondence course, and they were boring and dry and dull, and they're not anymore.
Yeah.
It can be really dynamic.
Okay. So, and then, there's also your teachers, I guess, teachers manuals, for lack of a better term. Where can the teachers access those?
Oh, actually, well, for Muchacho, I wrote a teacher's guide. So it's on my webpage. It's free. And there's a student guide as well. So if somebody wants to use that book, like in a classroom, it has assignments for the students to do in their journals. And then it has lessons for the teacher. And then teaching outside the box. I think I did a teacher's guide for that as well. And that's on my webpage.
Okay. And then when we go back to My Posse Don't Do Homework, you got the rights reacquired. You were saying earlier something about maybe, or you were thinking about maybe doing like a Kickstarter or something like that.
Yeah, a Kickstarter campaign to try to raise money to, get it first published, to do some publicity. That's if I decide to just do it by myself.
Yeah,
I haven't decided, if I did self-publish a couple of children's books, and it worked, but man, it takes all your time to do the business part of it. And then not a lot left for creativity. So the downside is, if you go with a publisher, then sometimes they take control of something and then they try to use it a little differently. Like when they were going to publish Muchacho, they kept wanting to put a picture of a gangster, a real gangster looking person on the cover. And I said, this kid is not a gangster. That's the whole point. He's an intellectual, but he's a secret intellectual. And he's trying to decide whether he's going to follow his cousin, who is a gangster, or whether he's going to follow his girlfriend, who's going to college. And he's worried about, he says, if you're intellectual, you're going to get your ass kicked. But his friend says, yeah, but not that much. So, so he's got to make that decision, and he's just walking that line that a lot of kids are doing. So he's street smart, and he hates school, but he kind of likes his teacher, and he was a secret reader. And so I said, no, I don't want to portray this. I don't want to just look at the negative part. I want to look at this as a whole kid. So they finally, they tried to tell me they couldn't find a Hispanic model. And I said, oh, give me a break. How many, 30 million Hispanic kids in New York City? How about
a few, yeah.
You can find one on the street that liked that as a picture on a book.
Yeah.
So I love the cover. I mean, they found the perfect looking kid. He's like, he looks like he might read you a poem or carjack you, one or the other.
That should lower the reader into another page turner. Okay, well, all right. So we can obviously look you up on the web. We can go to luannjohnson.com, and I think we want to have you again, Luann, just to keep us abreast of the book, My Posse, because we want to, if you can get that going, and maybe whether it's you do a Kickstarter or you however you go with a traditional publisher. I don't know how you're going to do it, but I think a lot of people will be interested to see that book come back in print, and even possibly, I know it sounds outrageous, but hey, 25th anniversary Dangerous Minds. I'm sure when you were in the Marines, you never ever thought that one of your books would make the silver screen. You never ever thought Michelle Pfeiffer would be sitting in the back of your classroom and
That's right.
watching you teach. And I'm sure you never thought your movie would the main song would win a Grammy Award and generate $180 million. So I say it again, maybe somehow it comes back as a remake, or
maybe we'll make our own.
You can make your own. Lots of people are making their own, or a sequel, or whatever. But I think the important thing is, I think you have to want to see you continue that. Don't let it sit on the shelf there, because everything is being remade these days.
I know.
Movies are being remade.
History with that.
Yeah.
Karate Kid and all these 80s and 90s movies are coming back.
Yeah.
And it would be a shame if one of these movies, because Luann, I was doing my research all week, and there are a lot of people out there who are interested in Dangerous Minds. I saw Michelle Pfeiffer. She posted a nice picture with Coolio with her when they were doing the video on set. She posted it it wasn't like this week, but it was in May. She obviously has some memories about the movie. I've seen other Coolio was talking about the movie with Yahoo earlier this week. So there's a lot of attention.
Yeah.
A lot of people remembering fondly, or even whatever memories they had, positive or negative, they still remember the book.
Yeah.
They still remember the movie, and that's the important thing.
Yeah.
So that's why I wanted to get you on here today. So can we have you on? As you decide what to do with that book.
Sure. And I know you'll keep me honest. Maybe make me follow through on it.
Yeah.
We got to be the Luann Johnson that like in the movie there. We got to make sure. We got to rage against the light and make sure.
That's right.
Because we joke about it, but this is an amazing thing. You have done a lot of teaching, and there are a lot of kids watching this show right now who maybe are not getting that. They're in the same positions that I think I was back when I was a kid. They're looking for that little sign of positivity, something to make them believe that they can be something or somebody.
For some leadership.
Yeah, they're looking for something, some kind of sign. They're not getting it at home. They're not getting it at school, and they're desperate. They're one step away from being another statistic. And back then, as well as we all know that there was no internet. There was the ability to find a mentor or to try to dig yourself out of that situation was a lot harder than it is now. We have a lot of technology. This show is online. People are watching it in the UK. They're watching it in Canada, North America, all over the world. And this message is going out everywhere. So that's why I wanted to, impress upon you to make a decision on that book. Yeah, do your homework. Do your homework. And we'd love to have you on again to talk about that. So, on behalf of the panel, I just want to thank you for sharing your story. I was just reminiscing, going in between the movie and going in between my own experience at school as you were sharing your story today, and it was quite fascinating. I think you made a big impact in this hour and a bit here. The time has just flown by, really. Talking about your story. So, hopefully we can have you back on with some more information on that. And was there anything else that you wanted to let everyone know who's watching?
No, I think you pretty much covered everything I can think of.
Yeah, Dangerous Minds 25th anniversary. Let me wrap this up here. It was a great movie. Great soundtrack too. Actually, I have the soundtrack, and not just Coolio, but Craig Mack was on there. Nice hip hop soundtrack, R&B.
Yeah, and some people, they mentioned like the acting was a little uneven. Michelle Pfeiffer was 7 months pregnant, so they were like filming, trying to get that thing done, and they didn't have their regular, editing and all that. They couldn't go back and reshoot anything. So
yeah, Coolio kind of talked about that. He said that she had like her babies on or children on the set when they were doing the video. It's such an impact, 1995 to 2020, and this movie's still being talked about and remembered. And I just hope that we can talk about the next phase of Dangerous Minds in whatever version you want it to come into fruition to. All right. So thank you so much for joining us, and you take care of yourself. And again, LuannJohnson.com. You can go there, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, online. Type in Luann Johnson as she recommends, and something will come up.
Doesn't even matter if you don't spell it right.
Well, you know what they say is, it doesn't matter as long as they get your name right, I guess. It's all good. But go out there and check her out. And, hopefully we will see you on TKO Countdown again soon.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right.
Thanks very much.
Take care, Luann. All right, Countdown Nation. So you heard it right here. Luann Johnson, the author of My Posse Don't Do Homework and Dangerous Minds, sharing her story on the 25th anniversary of her movie, Dangerous Minds, starring Michelle Pfeiffer, Renali Santiago, Brooklyn Harris, so on and so forth. I don't know about you guys, but that was kind of emotional for me because she was very giving in terms of the stories and the information regarding her experience. She talked about her experience. Holy cow, look what happened to her when she was at the Marines, her childhood, her upbringing. Kind of a rough upbringing there. And to be able to overcome that, being an introvert, and then being able to make something of herself, being a teacher, teaching, on the way along, flying on the seat of her pants, basically, and then becoming an author to the point where she was able to get the book deal or the movie deal with Dangerous Minds, and then went through another harrowing experience there trying to get the movie done. And yet still, she is still in the educational system. She is, doing a lot of online courses for teachers in the state of New Mexico, where she joined us from. And, I really hope that we can have her on again soon so she can discuss the next phase of My Posse Don't Do Homework. But, we're almost out of time here, guys. I kind of wanted to talk about the fights a little bit, but, anytime you have someone of the stature of Luann Johnson on, I think we kind of have to cede way, because in a way, we kind of had like a mixed martial author on the show. that was our first mixed martial. Well, actually, our second mixed martial arts because we had Alexandra Beneroff on last week.
Yeah,
talking about her book, The Dark Fight. So back to back mixed martial authors, which is amazing to me. But I'll throw it out. We got a couple minutes left, so just throw it out. What are your thoughts on the fights? Bellator, 243, UFC, on ESPN 32. What do you guys think?
I've always been a Benson Henderson fan. I was kind of sad to see him knocked out that way. But I mean, realistically, wow, that was.
Is it time for Benson to retire?
Yes, and is it time for Chandler to go somewhere else? Yeah, he needs to leave that. He's just wiped it clean. He needs to go to somewhere else now, a different organization, maybe something, and just test the waters there to really get a test for himself at this point. Benson, buddy, love you to death. You're fantastic, but for real, it's time to pack her in. You need to have that Joe Rogan conversation like he had with Brendan Schaub. It's like, God love you, but it's time to hang him up, friend. It is time to call it quits. On the girls' side for Bellator, Loretta, wow, and I felt kind of bad for her because she just basically said hooray to herself on Instagram, and people went off on her, talking about, dude, you're only 3 fights in, hush up. And she was saying things that were happening building up to the fight, and just struggles that she was overcoming like every fighter has. Have you ever heard a fighter ever that said, man, everything is perfect, coaching staff was great, no one was sick, everything was excellent, no injuries, no one at all, but you don't hear fighters talk about it often. And she was just talking, that's all she was doing. And haters jumping on her for that as well, basically saying, shut up, you won, press off. You got a lot of work to do if you want to actually be somebody. Which I thought, you know what? A win is a win, regardless of what led up to that win and regardless of what number that win is. It is not fair to discredit that. Any victory in anything in life has battles leading up to that point, and you need to overcome those things to get that victory, regardless of whatever it is. And she did that. So girl deserves props for that. I thought she looked fantastic. And if she keeps on this trajectory, I think she could be a name to look forward to. I don't think the bashing is necessary there, guys. Tame down.
All right. Anya, quickly, we're almost out of time.
I just want to know, did you guys notice between Dariush and Holtzman that, what was it he called it? The spinning back fist?
Yeah, I saw it. Yeah, it was nice.
And in an interview, did you see it? An interview afterwards, he said it was actually a friend of his son's who had told him to do that because he does it in the UFC 3 video game.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, to
His
be fair,
son's friend told him try it, and he's going, well, it's a video game.
Yeah.
Cool.
I think Beneil. Yeah, I mean it's nice, but I think Beneil has done that move before. But it was amazing that it connected. Obviously great move. Noel, your thoughts?
Yeah, just again about the Henderson fight. I mean, that's a common problem you find with fighters sometimes is they don't know when to say, that's it. It's time to pack it in. I mean, I've been through that. I've dealt a lot of fighters myself over the years that just didn't know when to say stop, and you're trying to tell them lightly sometimes or directly. It's time to pack it in. So yeah, I agree. It's time for him to, I think, to move on in that case. And it comes to with Loretta. Yeah, I agree. Like that was kind of harsh what I read. Some comments there, but she's climbing, and I'm really pleased to see what she's doing there. And but just keep bad that people always kind of go for the negative when it's in this case it's not necessary. I totally agree, but I think she has a lot of promise in the future, and I hope she has a very bright future. And just keep it coming, keep growing, keep getting better, and keep on taking those bigger, better fights.
Well, I'm sure Jorge Masvidal is going to help her and everyone on the American Top Team. I don't think we have to worry about her for a while. All right, guys, that was an amazing show. We're out of time here on TKO Countdown, here on the BarnBurner Media Network. A special thanks to our guest, Luann Johnson, author of the book, My Posse Don't Do Homework and Dangerous Minds there. A quick reminder that this show, TKO Countdown, can be heard on the BarnBurner radio network and all of its 122 platforms. Also check out barnburner.ca for all the news that's great in the world of combat sports and professional sports. BarnBurner, watch it, hear it, read it, download it, live it, and we will see you all next week with another fresh edition. Thank you. And take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
See ya.